Hello, Keith Rucker at VintageMachinery.org. Well guys, today we're going to get started scraping in our 18-inch straight edge that I've been working on now for some time. I've got previous videos where I showed how I milled all this on my mill machines, and then we took it over to the surface grinder. I actually ground it in and inspected it. It's pretty darn flat right now, but we want to get it scraped in so that it's perfectly flat, and this will become a reference surface that I will use when I'm scraping in my Monarch lathe. So this is a brand new casting, like I mentioned before, that I purchased from Richard King. He sells these straight edge castings, and basically I'm making my own straight edge. So let's get in here and get started doing some scraping. I have my work securely mounted in a vise here where I can work on it, and I got my surface up that I want to be scraping. I like to have my surface I'm scraping up and flat, so sometimes you have to move your part around to do this, but it's a lot easier to scrape in a flat plane than it is at some angle. Now, as far as the techniques for scraping, there's basically two different ways that you can do it. First off is with a hand scraper, and this is a Dapra or Biax type hand scraper. This is actually one that I made, but it's basically using their design. And basically it's just a piece of metal here, and it has one of the Biax blades. This is the same blades that we use in the power scrapers. And you want this to have, you know, a little bit of flexibility to it. When you push down on it, you can get a little flex in there on it. Now, this is the cheapest way to scrape. You know, you can make or buy one of these type of scrapers here relatively inexpensively. And it's the time honored and time, you know, way that scraping has been done for thousands of years is using a hand scraper. And I'm going to actually start out by showing this, but then we're going to go to a power scraper. This is a Biax power scraper, and basically this just greatly speeds up the whole process. I guess the downside to the power scrapers is these are relatively expensive. So unless you're kind of in the business of scraping, if you're in the business of scraping, yeah, you got to have one. If you're a home shop guy that maybe only does this occasionally or a one-time deal, you know, it may not make sense to spend the money on one of these. I felt like I needed one of those many projects that I have going on, so I purchased a used one actually, and we're going to show you both methods of doing this. We'll start with the hand scraper though. So with the hand scraper, what you want to do with it is come in here and again get in here on your part, kind of push down on it. Some people will push this with their hands, but you will find that it will get very tiring very quickly. It's much better to kind of put this up against your body and I kind of put it down here. I make a little cradle down here in my arm and put it down here and come in here and start scraping by hand. When you're doing your scrape marks, it's very important that you create a pattern. I like to go diagonally across the part, and when I come back the next time, I'll come back the other way. This kind of creates a checkerboard appearance on here, as Richard King calls it, and that will just kind of help keep things going. Some people, when they're starting, you know, they may just kind of come in here and randomly pick angles to choose from. Get in a pattern, stay in that pattern, and you're crisscrossing over your scrape marks. And what that's going to happen over time as this piece scrapes in, you'll start getting those high points and low points. The whole purpose of scraping is not only to get it flat, which is definitely something we want to do, but on a machine surface, when you have two surfaces that are going back and forth, you want to have some low spots in there for the oil to go to. That's the reason we don't just take it right off the surface grinder and go over there and put it on there. There's no place for the oil to go. And this will actually score up very quickly if you just try to use two ground surfaces. You got to have a place for the oil to go. And that's what hand scraping does. It gets it flat, but you have high points and you have low points, and those high points are bearing the weight of your two parts, but then you have those lower areas that the oil can actually stay in to lubricate things. So anyway, when you're hand scraping, you know, come in with your stroke and pull out. You know, when we first start, a lot of times we'll tell people to do the tap, 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 tap. Because you want that scooping action to kind of come in there and come out. Again, you want to do it in crisscrosses. A lot of times I'll actually take a little 45, like a little speed square, and draw lines on my part to make sure that I stay at those angles. This is, as you're going, sometimes you kind of get offline, and those will give you some guidelines to go on. The other thing about hand scraping is don't be afraid to push down on this thing. So, you know, some people say, well, I'm scared I'm going to take off too much material. You know, if you get over here and just really gouge as hard as you can go, you're only taking tenths of a thousandths of an inch off. So, you know, a good scrape mark is probably 4/10, maybe 5/10. 3 to 4/10 is probably more average what most people are doing. When people first start, they're very often only taking maybe 1/10 because they're scared to really put some weight into it and remove some material. And you can actually see the cast iron starting to come up here on my part as I'm going across here. I'll zoom you in here and kind of show you this. Now, when you first start scraping apart, again, I'm doing kind of 45s across here right now. I know from my grinding that this thing is within probably 6/10 of being perfectly flat. If you don't know, or you got more than that, you really just kind of get in here and just start scraping. Paint scraping is what Richard calls it, just going really hard to get a place to start with. I don't want to do that on this part because I know I'm already fairly flat. But we're just going to come through here. Do that. When you get through going in that direction, you'll come back through here and create that crisscross. And I'm probably not actually pushing down. My part's moving around a little bit on the vise here. I probably should secure that, but when I start power scraping in a minute, it won't matter. But anyway, you kind of get the idea. We're making those crisscrosses. That's hand scraping. I'm going to go ahead and go to power scraping because it's just so much faster, and I need to get this done. Hi guys, I got my Biax power scraper. So this thing, basically when you turn it on, it creates an in and out motion for that scraping. And it's at the right angle and everything here. You put these blades in. You know, one thing this, I get asked, well, can't you just use some other machine to do what this does? And yeah, you could probably find a little reciprocating something to create that action. But really what you need is to be able to adjust the length of that stroke depending on what stage of scraping you're in. This one's got a little set screw in here, and you can adjust that length of that stroke. Right now I've got it set on about a 3/8 inch stroke, which is kind of for making finishing passes. Well, again, we've already kind of got this down pretty close, so I don't want to make just great big huge strokes. When we get into finishing, you know, we're going to take it down to a really, really fine stroke, you know, around 1/8 of an inch long to 1/4 of an inch or somewhere along in there, or 1/8 to a 1/16 actually. So having that ability to adjust the stroke is very important. Now with this Biax, you just kind of come in here and I usually, again, make a little cradle in my arm and let this rest in here. You want it to be kind of down at an angle. And when you're working this thing, you want to just kind of move your whole body side to side as you go across it and let it do the work. Now when you're doing scraping, one of the things that Richard always tells us is to make individual scrape marks. So you want it to come in and make a mark. You don't want your next one to be on top of it. You want it to just be an individual mark, and you want to work in individual lines. So you just start making a line and let those individual scrape marks develop. I'll also point out that I just took a Sharpie pen and again a little speed square here and went along and put some lines on here at 45 degrees across my part, and that's going to help me stay where I need to be and keep my lines in the right orientation. Anyway, let's do it. So we'll just come in here and all right, we got one direction done. Now we're going to come back and go in the other direction. All right, we made really 2 passes here, and we're starting to already see that scraping pattern come in there. Now, if you run your hand across this, you're going to feel a lot of little burrs on the surface there, and we want to knock those burrs down. And to do that, I'm just going to use a stone, and we're just going to lightly just knock those burrs off. I'm not trying to stone this surface down. I just want to get those burrs off before I take it over to my surface plate. So before we take it over to the surface plate to glue up, first thing I want to do is I want to just take a little Windex and hit this and just wipe it off. Now this is going to be more important later on when you're got the blue from the previous bluing on there. We're clean right now, but it's still a good practice. I've deburred it. We're going to do that. And then the next thing I want to do is come in here, and I'm just taking some Canode yellow, and this looks like a mustard container, but it's a water-soluble dye. And this yellow, we're going to just put a light coat on here before we blue it up. And what this does is it just kind of helps take the sheen off of what you just did. And it's going to be real important when you come back on the next scraping so you can see your scrape marks, your new scrape marks. So we're basically taking that sheen off of there, and really kind of helps you see what you're doing on that particular pass, because after a while things just start running together. So we can roll that on, grab a paper towel here, and we're just going to wipe it off now. But still, you really can't probably see it very well, but when you start scraping, you'll see those nice clean scrape marks on there, and you kind of have this little yellow on there that just takes that sheen off. So let's go get our surface plate prepped, and we'll blue this up for the first time. Over at the surface plate now, and we need to go ahead and get this prepped so that we can start bluing up. So anytime I first come in and start using the plate for the day, I want to make sure it's good and clean. And you can just take your hand and rub across this. And I actually cleaned this plate earlier today, and I can already feel with my hand little specks of dirt and stuff that's gotten on this just in the last little bit of time. So every time I come up to this plate, I'm going to wipe it with my hand. But to start with, it's good to go ahead and get a good cleaning on it. So you need to use some type of cleaner. They make a surface plate cleaner that works just fine. I'm just using Windex here. 401, any type of cleaner will work just fine. I'm going to squirt it down. We'll take some paper towels and just wipe it off. Now I've already cleaned this up from the last time I blued it, but if you have blue on here, you may have to really get the old blue off, at the end of the day or beginning of a new day, or even during the day. Sometimes you need to just clean your plate off and start over. So let that dry off. It just takes a couple of minutes here, or a minute or so, and you'll start seeing that color change. That's the water evaporating off. And again, I'm just going to take my hand and I'm going to rub across it, because that paper towel that I just used, it has lint in it. And even that you'll get little specks on there. I can feel it with your hand. It's amazing what you can feel with your hand. This is clean now. So let me get some blue. So I'm using just a Canode blue. This is a dye spotting blue. Again, it's very similar to the old Persian blue, or some people use Dichem. The nice thing about this stuff is it's water soluble. You can go to the sink and clean it up. With Persian blue, you often stay blue for several days. Anyway, I really like this stuff. I'm just going to start just like a painter, and we're going to get some here in the middle of the plate, and that becomes our palette that we'll work off of. I've just got a little sponge roller here, and we're just going to kind of get us a area here that we can get blue off of to actually blue the table up. Now when you're doing this, you don't want a really thick layer of blue. You want it to be really thin. You want to be able to see through it. So this is basically where I can go back and get a little bit more. I'm going to be bluing up down here on this edge of my table. Again, I'll wipe it, and we're just going to transfer some of that blue down here to it. I'm going to need a pretty long stroke here, strength. I can see through this layer, and it may even still be on a little bit too thick. I've also got a little roller here. One thing about this canode is they grind it up, and you get, sometimes you can have a little bit of grit in there. This kind of helps crush that up. So I like to just roll it. It also helps spread it out a little bit thinner on the plate. All right, we've got a nice area here. Again, I'm going to take my hands, and I'm just going to kind of wipe across it, make sure it's clean. I'm going to do that every time I come over here. Yeah, I get a little blue on my hands, no big deal. Now let's get our part and put it on here, see what it looks like. All right, we have the straight edge. I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to just put it down onto the plate. And now, I'm not going to push down on this. I just want to kind of slide it back and forth. That will transfer some blue. I can tell from the sound of this that I've definitely got some high spots in here. The other thing that's really important is to hinge this part. And to hinge it, what I mean is you go down here on one end and you just take your hand and you move it back and forth. And I can see it's pivoting on this corner right here. Now ideally, when it's flat, it's going to pivot about a third in from each side and right in the middle. Right now it's pivoting right here on this corner. That tells me that's my high spot. And over here, it's pivoting somewhere kind of over in this area. So I got two high spots on the ends, and we'll flip our plate over. And I'm going to zoom you in here where you can see this, and it kind of confirms what we just saw. All right, when we pivoted that, we were definitely seeing high spots on the ends. And what do we see here? We see blue on those ends. What happened is when I was scraping this, I didn't do a good job of getting all the way out here to these ends. And it's showing right now when I'm bluing this. I'm also getting a little bit of blue along this edge over here. Again, probably where I'm not getting out to those edges. So what are we going to do? What I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and we're going to make some crosses just like we did before. But I'm going to focus on these edges and try to clean those up because I didn't do a good job of that the last time. And then it's rinse and repeat. I'll Windex it, clean it off, we'll stone it, we'll put the yellow back on there, and then go blue it up again. So let's get in here and knock these high points off. I want you to see where I'm at now. I've actually gone through a couple more cycles of the scraping, and as I've talked about, we started out high on the ends, and as we do this, I've just been working on the areas that are blue. This area in here is still a little bit low, and again, I'm not talking about much. I've got a piece of 1/1000th thick shim stock, and I can't get it under here. So I know we're talking about tenths of a thousandth of an inch high, but we're slowly bringing it down. And I've worked it in now, so we've actually got blue making contact all the way out here and kind of all the way in here. I've still got a little bit of a belly that kind of goes in through here. And I use the term belly somewhat lightly because, again, we're talking about 10,000ths of an inch, but it's coming in. We're making progress. I'm just going to keep on going. All I'm doing here is I'm making crosses. I'm still making crosses just like we did before, but I'm only scraping the areas where there's blue. And I'm not just trying to hit the blue points. I'm making contact in this whole area in here. It's not a lot of contact yet, but I'm not worried about getting my points per inch up right now. I'm just worried about getting contact all the way across right now. So I'm scraping down these whole blue areas and just going back and forth and continuing to work it in until we get contact all the way across. All right, I just wanted to show you guys this because you saw the last one. I did one pass between that last time I blued it and this one, and all of a sudden everything's just starting to come in. I don't have a whole lot of points of contact yet again, but what's important is we're getting blue now almost over the entire part. So I may still have a little bit of a belly in here. If anything, this edge up here, which was high on the last pass that I just scraped down, it's now just a little bit low. So I'm really close here. We're going to make another pass. We're probably going to hit pretty much all of it. I'm going to try to stay out of a few little areas in here. In fact, I think what I'm going to do is I've got a little Sharpie pen here. I want to stay out of there. I want to stay out of there. So we're just going to try to avoid these when we're scraping. I got a little bit of a hole in here. Maybe a little bit up in here. And, maybe a little bit right in here. But everywhere else, I'm pretty much making blue. So what I'm going to do is we're going to come in here again and make another set of crosses. I'm going to stay out of these areas, and we'll blue it up again and see where we're at. All right, in the past, I've been really doing more roughing, so I've been doing basically two passes at once. So I've been going in both directions. I'm getting down a little bit closer now, so I think I'm just going to go in one direction. I'm going to take something here and just kind of put down where I remember, okay, I was going in this direction, so next time I'll know to go the opposite. So let's take it out. We'll clean this up, blue it up, and see where we're at. Well, I made a few more passes over there. And what I'm to the point now is I've got pretty much contact all the way across. Yes, it's heavier in other areas than some, but I have got contact from one end to the other. So I'm kind of getting beyond that the stage of scraping that I was in. I'm ready to kind of start fine-tuning this and getting it more flat and so forth. So we typically start looking at the number of points per inch as being a guide as to where we're at. And to do that, you can use a little gauge. This is actually one that Emma Ritson made. She 3D printed. It's got a 1-inch square hole in the middle. This is the one that DAPRA sells. Basically, this one additionally has some radiuses on there for grinding your cutters, but they both do the same thing. I kind of like this orange one because it really, you get that contrast in colors. But what you want to do is just lay this on here and look down in that hole and count the number of points. Now, some points are maybe a really big point, some points may be little points. You're not really looking at the size, you're just counting the total. So let me zoom you in a little bit tighter, kind of show you what I'm talking about. All right, hopefully you can see this, but we've got one great big area right here. That's 1 point. And this little bitty tiny one up here, that's 2. So we're going to count all these points, and there's a lot in this one. So I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 points. That's pretty good, but it's not that all the way across. So we come over here and we just kind of pick a random spot. Let me move you over. On this one, I'm getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, about 12. So I have gone across this and done this in multiple places across my straight edge, and I'm averaging anywhere from about, it's somewhere between 12 and 15, I would say, on average. Yeah, I've got some areas where I got 20. I got some areas where I may actually be a little bit below 12. But I'm guessing probably 12 to 15 points per inch is kind of on average of what we got across here. So when you take Richard King's scraping class, it gives you a little book, and it has some really good guides in here on what to do at different stages. We've kind of been at the finishing crosses. We started out, like I said, where we had less than a thousandths inch of variation across there. So we've been doing the crosses, going back and forth. So we're now down to 12 to 20 ppi, and we're wanting to change our strategy here a little bit. And there's two things I want to do. Number one, in the areas where I have a lot of contact, we're going to continue using some crosses just in those areas. But then we're also going to be going in here and doing what he calls dive bombing. So you just go in there and kind of hit an individual point and kind of knock those individual points down. And the other thing I need to do is we need to shorten up the stroke on the scraper itself. So we've been at about a 3/8 inch stroke. We need to get that down to between an 1/8 and 3/16. A little bit shorter stroke. We're finding tuning now. We're getting where we're trying to get this thing really dressed in. So we're going, again, dive bombing and crosses, but with a shorter stroke on our power scraper. All right, so we're dive bombing and crosses. Again, where I have just a few points, I'm just going to hit the high points. Where I've got some larger areas, we'll do crosses in there. So come in here, I got a point here. We just kind of go in here and hit individual points. We're trying to break them up. I'm going to slow it down a little bit. I'm getting a few more strokes in there than I really want. You know, these bigger marks, what you really want to do is kind of break them up into smaller marks. So you can have a big mark here that needs 1 point per inch, but when you come in here and break it up, I can turn that into 3 or 4 points per inch, and that's even better. So basically, I'm just making the blue go away. I'm dive bombing them. You know, in this area where I got a lot of contact, I'm doing my crosses. And we're just going to work our way across this until we kind of get them all done. Remember, you know, we're trying to get individual scrape marks and individual lines. We're really not trying to cross over. You know, if you go in there and you dive bomb a point and you miss it, don't worry about it. Don't try to go in there and just dig out a hole. Just go on, blue it up, and catch it on the next run. If you're not careful, you will dig a hole. And we don't want to dig holes. And look over this, make sure I didn't just miss any like that one. This is where that yellow really helps, because you can tell where you've been and where you haven't been. All right, that's good for now. Well, I've continued scraping on, and we've got really looking pretty nice now. We've got pretty good coverage across here. I've checked this out. This is roughly 20 points per inch. and I'm going to estimate that it's somewhere between 20 and 30% coverage, which is for a machine not bad. I'd probably like to get a little bit better coverage for a machine surface. It's not done yet. On a straight edge though, I really want to get it up to about 40 points per inch. A lot more bearing points and a little bit closer together than this. So at this point, we're again kind of going to change our strategy. I'm going to put a different blade into the Biax scraper, one that has a larger radius on it. Let me show you what we got here. So this blade here has about it's a 60 radius, I believe is what that one is. And yeah, 60 radius. And the idea here is with that larger radius is I'm actually scraping the part that's coming in contact that's going to be much smaller. And my goal here is when I come in here and scrape this, again, I got on a real short stroke, a real narrow cut that I'm making. And all I'm going to do is just come in here and kind of dive bomb these blue points. I'm not going to scrape anything that's not blue at this point. I'm just hitting these. I'm just going to come in here and I'll just kind of go boom, 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 and hit those. Go dive in and come right back out. I'm not making long strokes like I was before. Boom, boom, boom. So we're going to do that, and basically what I'm doing here is we're not trying to eliminate all these points. I'm just trying to cut them up into smaller pieces, and at the same time that should lower these down and hopefully bring in some contact in some of these areas in between as well, because they're all really, really close. You know, they're probably all within a couple of tenths of being on the same plane. But of course, we're just hitting the highest points right now. So anyway, let's go in here. They call this sometimes the technique 40 method to get to 40 points. And that's what we're trying to do here. All right, so we're going to bring it over to the plate now. And first thing I want to do is just kind of glue it up. I can really feel it kind of sucking down to the plate, which tells me it's getting pretty flat. Now, when you're bluing apart, you don't want to just push down real hard on this thing. You just want to kind of go back and forth. It's not really that important how you go back and forth. Some people like to go in circles. Some people like to slide end to end. Some people go in figure eights. That's not important. What's important is that you move it across the surface of the plate and transfer the blue onto the high spots of the part. And again, as always, we're going to hinge it, and it's going about here and about here, which is about 30%, which is just what you want to see. That's telling me that it's not high in the middle, it's not high on the ends, it's fairly flat. So let's pull it off now. And yeah, we actually increased our coverage there a good bit. So let's take this over to the vise now, and I'm going to repeat that process, and we're just going to keep doing this until we get the total number of points down to where we want them. All right, we're going to come over here now to the plate again. I just went through another cycle, and we're going to glue this thing up again and hinge it, make sure everything's good. I'm going to do something a little bit different this time though. After I've done that, I'm going to take a peek, and we've got good coverage on the bottom. But what I want to do is I want to find the highest of my highs. So I'm going to take it over now onto an area of the plate that doesn't have any blue on it, and I'm going to rub it on there. And the idea here is that it'll actually take the blue off of the very, very highest points on the bottom there, and it'll kind of polish them. And I'm going to see my extreme high points. So now when I turn this over, and you're probably not going to be able to see this on camera because you have to really get down here and look, but some of these little points are going to have a little polished area in the very center of the blue. and that's my highest of my highs. Again, we're talking, again, a 10,000th of an inch higher. And this time I'm just going to go in there and I'm just going to hit those. I'm not going to worry about the other blue areas in here. I'm just going to hit those very highest points. And again, we're just trying to bring in some of these areas where we don't quite have the area of contact that we're looking for. So I'm going to do that, and we'll be back again. So here's what I've done. I literally got down here real down at a low angle, and I was looking across here for those shiny points, and I just took a Sharpie pen and I just touched each one of those little high points that are on there. Now there's a lot more blue in here than what just these high points, but these high points are the highest of the highs. And again, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in here, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in there and dive bomb each and every one of those little dots. It took me a little while to do that, but it's a lot easier for me to see that because the shiny points, you really kind of have to get the light just right. So I was literally having to get down there and look at it to identify all those. There's a couple of ways you can do this. I'm probably going to use the power scraper and again just go in there and dive bomb them. Some people will actually use the hand scraper here and just bump scrape them. They'll just literally put the point of the scraper, right on the point that they want to do, and then just take it and bump the end of the hand scraper with their hand and just hit those high points. But once we do that, hopefully we're going to be pretty darn close to being done with this thing. So let's get in here and dive bomb these real quick and see what it looks like. All right, guys, it is bluing up really nice. I'm still not 100% satisfied where I'm at, but I'm at a point now where we're going to probably stop on this side, and I'm going to flip over and start working on the dovetail up underneath this edge here. And same process as we just did, but we're going to work on that surface. It's very likely that as we remove some material off of that dovetail that it could change the bottom, just a little bit. So I'm not going to take it all the way down. I want to go ahead and get this dovetail scraped in, and then we'll come back and check the bottom and kind of go back and forth between the two until we get both of them spotting out just where we want to. But this is really pretty darn close. In fact, it's probably good enough as it is, but I'm going to try to get a few more points of contact in there before we're done. So anyway, let's start working on the dovetail. So for this dovetail edge, I've got a little fixture here that I actually cobbled together when I was working on my 36-inch straight edge, but it works good on this one too. It's a little bit long, but we're going to leave it like it is. But basically, I want to work on this as flat as I can. So basically, I just took a piece of wood, cut a couple of 45s, made a cradle that this thing kind of sits down in. I clamped this down to the bench, then I clamped my part to this little riser in the back here. There's two little supports back there, and that gives me a fairly rigid work surface here that I can now scrape on. And I'm scraping flat rather than at an angle. You can scrape at an angle, but it's difficult anytime you get off of anything that's flat. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible. So we're going to come in here, and I'm probably not going to show all this just simply because you've seen the process. We'll start off with making fairly long strokes and doing crosses. Again, this has been ground in, so it should be pretty close. We'll blue it up and just go through the same steps that we did before until we get our area of contact that we're looking for over here. Well, here you go, guys. All finished up. I've spent probably another hour and a half scraping the dovetail in, and then after I did that, when I flipped it over, the bottom side had actually kind of come in just a little bit, so I was bluing up in the back but not in the front. It took about one or two quick passes on there, and we were back covering up completely, and then I checked the front again and everything looks good. So point in case there, when you're doing something like this, when you get a surface flat, then you remove some metal on the other side, it's probably going to move a little bit. Again, we're talking 10,000ths of an inch here. Very tiny amounts, but when you're scraping, that can make a difference. But anyway, this is done. I'm down to, it's probably 35 to 40 points and probably about 45% or 30 to 40% coverage as well on there, which I'm happy with. This is going to be fine. And the thing about a straight edge is every time you use it, the first thing you'll do is you'll go blew it up on the table, check it out, and you may have to go in there and fine tune it, but each and every time use it, because it will move. It's going to move with temperature changes. It's just going to move, period, over time. So don't ever just trust that it's right. Your surface plate is your calibrated surface. You always check the straight edge to the surface plate, and then you can use the straight edge as your reference surface. So anyway, I'm very happy with the results. I thought it turned out real nice. Now I need to build me a little box to store this in so it doesn't get damaged and protect it, but that'll be a project for another day. So there it is, and there was a quick demonstration on scraping. That was just a very basic introduction. There's a lot more to it than really what I covered there, and I'll probably be doing some more scraping videos along, and hopefully you can pick up a few more tips. I will just say up front, guys, I am by no means an expert on scraping. I've been through a couple of classes. I know the basics. I obviously was able to get this thing flat to within, fairly flat anyway. It's within 35, 40 points on here. So I'm happy with that. I can get the job done. An experienced scraper could probably do it in about half the time, but I can still do it in because I'm still learning. But the techniques and the practices that I use, I think, will work. But anyway, there you go. That's my disclaimer, I guess. And like I said, we'll be doing some more scraping projects down the road, and you'll probably get to see this straight edge in action soon when I start scraping in, or finish scraping in, the dovetails on my lathe over here. So with that, that'll be a wrap. Thank you guys for watching. As always, leave me a thumbs up if you like what you see. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks.